I'm going to teach you how to build a knife. In this 10-part comprehensive build series, I'm going to share my tips and tricks for success in making your first knife, and we're going to get started right now. Hi guys, I'm Aaron with Aleeknives. Welcome to my channel. If this is your first time visiting and you want to learn more about knife making and cool tips and tricks for metalworking, you should start right now by hitting that subscribe button and then ring the bell notification so you're notified of all my future content. So I just showed you a whole bunch of commonly scavenged materials that beginning knife makers generally have in their head would be good to make a knife out of. And they are good steels, but I'll tell you what, my advice would be not to use any of those. If you've never made a knife, or if maybe you've made one and you're planning on making another one, the best thing you could do is to just spend $10 or $15 and buy a piece of steel with known alloy. It's going to help you out tremendously. The entire purpose in this 10-part build series is to take you and up your success rate in knife making. That's the whole idea. If your first knife turns out awesome, you're going to be more apt to build another one, and then another one, and then another one. And every single knife that you build is going to get better and better and better. That's just the natural progression of being a maker. So I'm going to bring you in close and show you the differences between these steels. I generally use a 1084 or a 1095 steel for beginning knife makers in my shop. I teach a lot of people how to make knives, and I choose these steels because they're really easy to heat treat. You almost can't get it wrong on these steels. In each one of the 10 parts of this build series, I'm going to show you guys each step of the way in depth, and at the end of this series, you should be able to build a quality first knife, and you're going to get to build it with me, which is going to be really cool. Okay, so I'm going to bring you in close. I'm going to show you the difference between cold rolled, hot rolled, and precision ground, and why you need to know those things. Because when you go out and buy your first piece of steel, you need to be able to read that description and know what they're talking about. Those things right there are even going to further up your success rate in your first build. Because if you have a piece of steel that's perfectly cut and it's the size and shape that you need for your first knife design that you're choosing, it's going to help you out tremendously. Here we have a selection of steel laying out on the table. These are all steels that I would suggest to a new knife maker, and I do this basically every week in my shop. People come over and want to make knives. So I tell them, pick out a piece of that 1084 or 1095 over there that the knife design that you've chosen will fit on, and I generally give them this steel. It is so cheap. I can't even imagine wasting some time on a piece of scrap steel when you can buy this piece of steel right here for $10 or less. That's almost a zero initial investment, and you can guarantee you're going to have a perfect heat-treated knife very easily. These steels right here are incredibly easy to heat treat. They're almost foolproof, and I'm going to show you that later in this series. So what I would do is if I were you making my first knife, I would draw out my design, I would measure the dimensions of the knife, and then I would go online and I would choose a piece of bar stock that fits the knife design. Personally, I have lots of material laying around so that whenever I draw any design that I have, I can walk over and choose a piece of steel that it fits on, and then my goal is to have the knife fit very precisely on the piece of bar stock, so I have as minimal amount of cutoff as possible. Less waste, less time at the grinder, less abrasives. It all adds up to good. So anyhow, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go cheap and buy a piece of hot rolled steel. This hot rolled steel, what they do is they roll it out hot, and then they cut it with a shear. And what happens is when they cut it with the shear, it rolls the edge over as they slice it off. The edge is not uniform, and it's rolled over. The problem with that is if you lay a knife design on here that comes up near the edge and you cut it out, the edge is rolled over. So then when you go to put handle scales on it, you're going to have a gap there. The only way around this is either to only cut your knife design out of the center of a piece of steel, or to precision grind this after you've profiled it. Well, I don't know about you, but if you're making your first knife, you probably don't have equipment to precision grind. So, skip the hot rolled steel. You could do cold rolled that doesn't have the edge and they punch it differently. I personally would pay the extra $1 and buy precision ground. That's what I've grown used to using in my shop. I absolutely love it. I'll never go back. This is precision ground right here. It's absolutely precise from one end to the other. It's precise down the sides. I can lay a knife design on here that goes right to the edge, and it's perfect. I don't have to surface grind this. It is ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of steel and lay it on the paper. Now, what I do right off the bat is I draw around my steel so that I know how big of a knife that I can make. We're going to make a hunting knife. I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 pieces here. That way, if I don't like my first design, I can jump right over to my second box and draw a second one. Okay, so there we go. Alright, that's a little better so you guys can see. Okay, I always draw my knives with my tip over here and the handle over here. You could do it however you want. One thing that I do think is important is that first you take your hand and you put it on there and decide, you know, how big your handle should be. There you go. The handle to blade ratio should be about 50%, I find, on a hunting knife. It makes it pretty good. And then I chose a nice wide bar stock, which means that I want to utilize all of that stock. I want very little cutoff. So I'm going to come right to my edge. Now, do remember one thing. When you trace around a piece of bar stock, this line here is always going to be larger than the actual stock. So you want to draw your entire knife with a little bit of space on the top and bottom and back, and that's going to help out tremendously. Alright, so there's the butt of the knife right there. And if that's the halfway mark, let's make this a little drop point. There we go. That's a nice design right there. I'm liking that. I like to lay down a lot of pencil, and then I'll erase what I don't like. And that's just exactly what I'm talking about. Let's just give this kind of a belly. We're going for a more simplistic design. What that's going to do is make it easier. Let's thin this out just a little bit. There we go. That's actually much better. Bring this handle up, and then you just jump over here with your eraser. You erase what you didn't like. I like to look at knife making as a fluid art. This is a generalization of what I'm going for. When I cut this out, I'm not going to try to make this exact. You can, but I also don't think that you have to. You don't have to follow this perfectly. You're going to find out that as you make it, things sometimes look great but don't feel great in your hand. And you just need to know, hey, if I'm making this and this handle needs to be a little wider, let's make the handle a little wider, you know? It's all right if it doesn't come out exactly like my plan indicated. There we go. That's gonna be pretty cool. And then let's see, for first knife, I'm thinking we're gonna go with kind of a straight bevel. And it's just gonna kind of blend in, something like that. And then on the handle scales, a lot of times I use something like this. That's too big of a radius. How about something more like that? Oh yeah, that looks good. And one of the things that I also like in designing a knife is instead of, okay, I like the way that this leans forward, like leans forward rather than leans back. Here, I'll show you what I mean. If it was leaning back, it doesn't really flow with the knife at all. So by taking this forward radius and leaning it forward slightly, it flows with the geometry of the knife. All right, so I like that. I think that's gonna be a really, really good knife. Give you just a little bit of a finger area up here. This is gonna be a, kind of an integral finger stop. And then we go into a simplistic handle shape. Kind of come up here. I'm liking that. That's gonna be it. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make that as the first knife. Now, I don't really worry too much about pin placement right now. I'll start with this. You know, I might decide to put a couple pins here. I might put a pin here. I might go a lanyard hole. I might put a pin there. I'm not gonna figure that out right now. Right now, I'm gonna go ahead and go with this design right here. I could have stretched this a little bit farther for a little bit bigger belly, but I think that this looks really good right there. So we're gonna roll with it. That's what we're gonna do. So I hope you guys enjoyed the first video of the build series. We went over the different steels that you can use and why. Obviously you can use any steel that you want to and it would apply to this build series. And then we went over some design element tips and tricks and we designed our first knife. In the next video, we're gonna be going over laying that out and doing some profiling. I hope you guys stick around. Please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of my future videos, especially this 10-part build series. And thanks for sticking around, guys. I'll see you in the next one.